Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Watchmen Talk, a series of conversations with Israeli military and security experts and practitioners. And our guest for a second part of our conversation is Reserve Brigadier General Dr. Ephraim Lapid. Welcome back.
Welcome.
Now, your unit at that time called 848, later renamed 8200, obviously one of the best known such units in the world, the equivalent of the NSA in the United States and GCHQ in Great Britain and other such units, was very disappointed by what happened on the eve of the Yom Kippur War. You thought you had all the capability and the facilities for early war warning, but for some reason it wasn't deciphered this way by the echelons above you. What happened?
This is still, until today, we are almost 50 years after, it is still an enigma for us to understand what happened. Your very simple question, what happened, we know the facts. It was for us a surprise that after we collected hundreds of pieces of information about operations in the Egyptian arena and in the Syrian arena, and we were sure that all these practices are in the scale of a strategic exercise. Such a big fault, which few hundreds of Israeli intelligence officers were involved, and no one indicated seriously that we are in a big mistake.
But you know, it's very interesting because, of course, there is this rivalry between Mossad and AMAN, AMAN being military intelligence. And one of the key people at Mossad later claimed that he doesn't understand how this assessment failure could come about because the items spoke for themselves. Obviously, and you were a spokesman later, obviously, items do not speak for themselves. One must interpret them.
I attended every day in the last 10 days, before the war, every day there was a meeting of 20 to 25 people from all functions of the intelligence, from the Egyptian department, from the Syrian department, from the Air Force, the Navy, the Southern Command, and so on. 20 to 25 people.
Military intelligence or Mossad
Military intelligence, and sometimes also some representatives of Mossad, but at that time the Mossad had not a responsibility also to analyze the information. They were defined as a collection organization. But back to the meeting, a daily meeting that at the end of 2-3 hours every day that we checked the information, the head of the forum, who was the head of the analysis department, asked, is there anyone here that thinks differently? Please tell us. And no one stood. And it is not only a poem. This was the reality. And you asked me how it happened. Even today, I don't have a considerable understanding how it happened.
But there is a possible explanation, at least a partial one. There are certain pieces of information which have to do with your political masters or about have to do with the secret diplomacy between Golda Meir and Henry Kissinger, to which uniformed personnel are not privy to, and therefore are not capable of making the net assessment?
I'm not sure that this is an important fact, of course, but I'm not sure that this is the explanation. What we did not have is the level of intention. We had the level of facilities. We knew what is going on more or less in the area, near the Suez Canal, near the Golan Heights from the Syrian arena. We did not have, we spoke before about a 67 event of two leaders of King Hussein and President Abdel Nasser. At 73, 6 years later, after we were so impressed from our success in 67, we did not have this level of intention.
Between Sadat and
Assad. And we, although we have to mention here the important role of King Hussein, who bravely came to Israel, not only sent the information by, but came to Israel personally to our Prime Minister Golda Meir to share with her his feelings that a war is coming. And even after I tell it now, and I'm deeply concerned about our failure, that how after all the indicators that we had, we did not succeed to have our highest mission, to give the early warning that a war is coming.
So the problem really is not within intelligence, but above it and around it. For the decision makers on the civilian and military side, the command echelons, to set as a default what they have to do if they are not certain that this is not a war, an imminent attack.
Exactly. And I can say, of course, we can never say never again, but one of the highest important lessons of 73 is that all the Israelis, and I think also many intelligence services in the world understand that intelligence is, of course, sufficient. Intelligence is a basic tool to make decisions, but it's not enough. And you have to be prepared also to a case that you don't have enough information, and you have to be prepared also to operate without all the options.
But wasn't the real failure one of imagination and also of what one may consider a cost-effective approach, by which the Israelis were too clever by half, saying, aha, Sadat may want us to believe that he is going to attack us, so that we will offer diplomatic concessions without him making any move, so we are not going to play into his hands. We will consider it as if he is not going to attack us.
In 67, we initiated. We were the first. And we suffered from the public opinion, international public opinion, that we were the aggressors. So it was in the back of mind of our leaders that we don't want to, even in the sake of
gaining the military advantage,
preventing the war, to start.
But rather to absorb the first blow.
And we thought that we are able.
So what was the lesson? Of course, this was a very bitter experience and the most traumatic experience in the 74 years of the State of Israel. But what was the professional lesson which was then implemented in the SIGINT business?
The lesson was to all units, not only to the SIGINT. The first important lesson, which exists until today, is the explanation and the wisdom is not according the rank. The sergeant can give a wonderful explanation, sometimes better than the major and better than the colonel. And it's not only a phrase, it is reality. And we see that in intelligence, much more than in other services, the abilities of junior staff, especially in a country in which the military service is compulsory, and we get the best people from every year, which doesn't exist if you are a professional military organization. So I think I can say, based on my direct contact with the intelligence today, that this lesson is very, very deep in the rows of intelligence.
How did cyber shape SIGINT? It grew first as a sort of stepbrother, and then, at least in public imagination, seems to have taken over.
Yes. The big change is that the role of the language, the role of the text, the role of the meaning is secondary to the role of the different segments. We know the numbers of telephone, we know the numbers of different facilities. We have the code word, or we have the
algorithm.
And the mix of different sources that cyber is the major one, but not only. Today, we can say that if we know the room in the 7th floor with the telephone of a person in the 7th floor, we compare it also with the information from the visual, from the satellite. We compare it with the information of a human source that we have there. So this mix is a daily work which did not exist in the past.
But a question which may be similar to what we talked about in our first part regarding the conversation between King Hussein and President Nasser. Who makes the decision when you hear a conversation, whether to jam the channel and then the other side cannot give orders, or to use it to plant fake information, to deceive? You have three different functions here.
Exactly.
And one of them is being done by electronic warfare, not by intelligence.
Exactly. And today, when I said today, it's, in the last decades, the cooperation between the jamming unit, which is a part of a different service, but nowadays, when we say services, the cooperation is very, very close. The Air Force, the Navy, the Communication Corps, and the intelligence, we have centers in which representatives of all these organizations sit once all together. And
but who's calling the shots? Who's the commander?
There is, in every center, there is a commander It can be the commander of the Southern Command or commander of the Northern Command. And I feel that all the troubles that we had in the past, including, of course, the personal competition, which was a major play, but I can't say that all is over, but most is over.
Human nature changed?
Human nature was composed
or just organizational culture?
With technology. So technology had a certain benefit on the gaps.
Now, General Lapid, you were in charge of the Israeli OSINT unit. At that time, newspapers, dailies, weeklies were still prominent. You had radio stations, you had
TV,
television channels, but no social
internet.
Media at that time.
Yes.
What is the purpose right now, and how important is it to monitor media in general? And is it an effective tool for decision makers?
Let's take two different arenas. Let's take Syria and the Palestinian Authority. In Syria, the civil war of the last decade, when I say our, I include also the West that monitor what is going on in Syria. The social media is the major source of information, much more than the formal information.
Which is censored or controlled by the government.
Exactly. When we take the West Bank, we have in the West Bank 1 million users of social media, and we control. When I say not 100%, but we control them in order to get
not really
the indicator.
You use the word control, monitor. You mean you don't?
I say control because it's not only monitoring personally to have the access to every piece of information, but if I take a car with the indication of the number of the car, which has a certain source of back information, and we know with the face of the person there, something about who is he.
And the credit card with which he pays at the gas station.
And so, therefore, I say control, which is much more than monitoring.
No, but you don't manipulate their behavior.
No,
you watch over them.
I don't manipulate. I control it only in order to prevent a terror attack. I give this description of 1 million social media users to show that there are no, it's not like in the Egyptian military from the headquarters to the
division or brigade.
Division and brigade. We have to see a unique person, 17 years old, who took a knife from the kitchen of his mother and go to the terminal of the train and stab an Israeli. So this is...
So you do it by having a regular pattern, and if you see an anomaly, you see someone behaving outside the norm, obviously with the help of artificial intelligence, so much data.
Exactly.
So Israel has become very proficient in it.
And especially because the challenge is a daily challenge. If I compare it to European countries, that we are in close contact with different European countries, the Scandinavians and the Western European countries, they have also the threat of international terror. They also have to to open eye to a person who landed now from Saudi Arabia or from Qatar or from Heathrow, because it's his third station. But what we had in Israel, what we have to do in Israel, with the 360 degrees of, on one hand, the nuclear threat, and on the other hand, the threat of a person with a knife. In Hebrew, it's misakin ad garin. It's a proverb.
From knife to nuclear.
From knife to nuclear. And imagine that from knife to nuclear is not only two different words, it's sometimes two different arenas and two different state of minds.
General Lapid, your career is too long to encompass in two short conversations, but let's try to move, because obviously your material was communications. You dealt with the way Israel's enemies communicated with each other, tried to hide their intentions and capabilities, and then you become, as a seasoned intelligence officer, the spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces. You have to contend with journalists. You want to speak through them, or even to bypass them, to speak to the Israeli public. How did you make this transition?
On one hand, everyone that checked the formalities, I was in the hidden side of collecting information, and now I have to expose it to the world. But the discipline, until the exposure, is the same discipline. I had to collect a lot of information. I had to see the priorities. I had to see what is major, what is secondary. I had to frame it and to use the best words and to use the best timing. All these highlights are relevant to intelligence and relevant to spokesmanship, the way that we convey messages to the world. After all, this, to be a spokesman, different from being intelligence officer, it is also, it includes also some different interests. I don't publish all what I know. I don't publish all what is done. I have to select, on one hand, what is important from the interest of the organization that I'm their ambassador, mainly the military and the security system, the defense system. And on the other hand, I have to see the techniques of the journalist, because the journalists are not the target. They are the medium. Really, the term medium means that we convey the messages, and if you want, not messages, we convey the information, because journalists doesn't like that we use the term message. So we convey the information to the public. The public can be in Israel, the public can be in West Europe, the public can be in the Arab world, the public can be in the parliament.
But in intelligence work, deception is legitimate, is to be expected. It's a war of wits with the other side, and sometimes you deceive either by deed, by action, or by words. On the other hand, the Israeli press would not have accepted any deception by you.
Exactly. I think that in the first years of Israel, in the same unit was also a section of what we called at that time psychological warfare. And more or less in 73, after the war,
You separated the function.
We totally separated it, and I think that if you had to pinpoint one word of a spokesperson, reliability. Reliability, he can be wise, he can be less wise.
Credibility.
But credibility and the fact that you have to be responsible of all what you publish, that's the most important
in a couple of lines, because our time is running short. What was your opinion of the Israeli press following your some 5 years of spokesmanship and your 6 decades of knowledge?
I think that the Israeli press is committed to the reality of Israel, I think, much more than in the international sphere of information, because the journalists and the heads of this organization are citizens of the same country.
So they are Israeli patriots first, and
they are responsible for
professionals later.
But they still are professionals, and there is also a contradictory interest.
So let's take this praise rather than explore it further, and end here. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Ephraim Lapid, Dr. Lapid, thank you very much. We will surely meet again in the near future, but for the time being, thank you very much. This has been another edition of Watchmen Talk with General Ephraim Lapid. We will be back with another episode soon.